Okay, so we're gonna make coil pots today, and what I want you to do is think about the coils. You can coil them up. You can allow the coils to show on piece if you want to on certain parts, or you can totally smooth out a part. So this one has one smoothed out side, one side that shows the coils. I made them into spikes and brought them up in the air so you get that negative space showing off of the top of it. So think about those. This one I did with coils also, and I did in two totally different ways. I'm going to show you both ways really quick how I did this. This one I built with really flat coils and built up the side, totally smoothed this together before I started cutting into it to create it. So you can get the look of things that are on the potter's wheel by doing that kind of thing. You have more control over it, and you can build higher, higher, higher. So these are relatively high. Keep in mind they were a little bit taller when they were first done too. They're going to shrink one more time, which is depressing. The more big the thing is, the more it shrinks as it goes along. So you lose 10% by this point, and then another 10% in the final firing. So these both were made that way. So the coils, when you're working with them, basically you want to start with a piece of clay, and somebody want to grab me a cutter in there real quick. So the coils, I'm just going to make just a basic coil to start with, and just start with kind of a rounded out to begin with. The trick to coils, thank you. The trick to coils is to make sure that your fingers are spread when you do this, because if you have them straight, you're going to dig them straight down in one little spot, and you'll end up with bumps up and down. If you spread them out, it comes at an angle on your finger, and that way it makes it so that they will, you won't get those spots. You kind of move your hands around, constantly looking for the spot that's a little bit thicker, and work through it. Always have your hands moving in or out as you do it too. Again, if you stay in one spot and have your fingers straight, you're just going to dig straight down through it and leave a bunch of bumps everywhere. So spread them, move them, and the coils you usually don't want to do less than this unless you do want to make something so that it is like a really delicate part of something. You can make a thin coil. Most of the time you want it to be big enough to be able to smooth at least one side together to completely. If you leave the coils everywhere, it's going to be very fragile. You need to make sure at least one side is smooth together so it will hold in the thing. So that's as little as you want to go. I'm going to go ahead and cut off and show you how I made these. The one that looks more like the tornado coming up with the little spikes, that one I did 3 coils next to each other, and I actually did them super long. You don't have to do quite that big. I made all of that in one piece. I never stopped and started with the coils. So all of those were one big coil, and I kind of make it into kind of a square to begin with, and then kind of flatten it out so that you can kind of get it moving along, get it closer to the shape to begin with. And then again, I was on a very large table. You don't have to do this on a board. You certainly, for cleanup purposes, it's a lot better to be on a board, but if you do it on the table, just keep in mind it will potentially stick to the table, so be careful. And then you have to clean up afterwards. So here I'm going to have to use the palm of my hands a little bit more because it's just harder to push them through. If you start getting kind of a flat side, this is kind of, especially if you hear kind of a thunk thunk when you go to the sides, that happens relatively often. You have to put it up on its angle and make it into a square again, and then start again. And because I'm not going down a whole table, I'm just going to show you the basic idea to begin with here. So, starting to thunk thunk again. Just pick it up, square it out, roll it out. So these I stayed about this thick all the way through it. I'm going to put this off the edge and just roll this side real quick so I get that about even. Work my way through, move it over a little bit so I can take care of just the thicker spots. Now, one of the things you want to do is work relatively quickly on this, but not so fast that the ends are flipping all over the place because they'll break. But you want to work relatively quickly because you don't want these to do 2 out of this one. You don't want these to dry out as you go. A lot of times people, especially if you're sitting there talking to your neighbor, this is nice soothing motion, and they just sit and talk, and then it ends up cracking on them and falling apart later. So you have to kind of be a little bit focused on what you're doing. So imagine on this one again that these were probably about 3 to 4 feet long when I did it, and I actually had it up over my back when I was working on putting it together. You do not have to do that to that point. You can also stop and start coils right next to each other. Just make sure they're not just butted right up against each other. They overlap at kind of an angle when you do it. So cut your edges. If they're just like this, they can break apart really easily and have troubles, so have them at an angle. So here's the second one. I did 3 together. On that one, to create that upward lift, I wanted it to swirl upwards. If I do 3 together, it made that angle faster. If I just do 1 at a time, the angle's pretty low. You can totally do that if you want. I just knew I wanted this to have that kind of a look to it for the piece. So, quickly get this to the same rate. Okay, so I worked with the 3 together. I made my base, and I just happened to do 3. You can do 4 or whatever. I'm just going to quick push out a bottom. Now on these, as with everything, think about where the foot is going to be. Think about where the glaze is going to start and stop. If you don't, you're going to end up with some kind of weird where you have to start partway up the side. This one I started partway up. It works in this one, but you will see that edge to it. This one I gave a definite lip where it starts and stops on the piece. So right through here. So think about that when you're creating this. And when you cut your piece, you could use something to cut around to actually create this. I'm just going to freehand it just for speed's sake. Just look for a bowl or anything that would be about the right size. So there's my base. You can kind of make it so that the edges are rounded to begin with so that you don't have to do anything to this later on. So there's the base for it. So I took these, and if you work quickly and these are still wet, which is a little hard to do in a 50-minute time period, but actually what I did was connect them first. I'm going to do that quick. So with connecting them first, what I use is just the end of one of the forks or a spoon or anything like that, and I kind of crisscrossed. And made the inside so it was connected. And then you'll still have your coils on the outside, so you're good. So, thanks. Yeah, you hold on. So this is just like smoothing out frosting, kind of. I mean, you can even run down the end. You can, with your finger back and forth, and work that together. So there's my edge that I'm working with, and again I'm working kind of quickly, so that's a little more rough than what I would have done on that, but it was pretty much like this, and then I went through and actually pulled that upward. So when I did this, I did have it over my back, and I connected. The first piece I want to make sure that, again, I have it kind of an angle coming off of there. I'm not working that big, so I can go back a little bit. And it works actually pretty good to put this on a piece of paper. Make this so that it can actually work on a turntable. I do have turntables in the back if you want to use them. If you haven't noticed them, they're under where the second firing is. I'm not really working that big on this, so I can take these off to show. So, putting this on, and then this will continue up the side. And you can see that it can be built pretty quickly from there. So this was the concept. I did not just slip and score this only because I just did both of them, so they're still the same wetness, still pretty good together. You certainly could slip and score the first layer especially to make sure that it stays. So score it up. I'm going to make a comment with slip and scoring. A lot of people are remembering to do it, but not everybody is remembering to do the wiggling it afterwards, I think. If any of your pieces are coming apart as you're working with this, you need to make sure that you get it connected So you're remembering the glue, you're remembering the scratching, but the part that you're forgetting, I think, is to put it on, allow enough slip so that it will actually ooze out the sides. You do want that. So get it like that and then wiggle it in. So handles, all that kind of stuff, you need to wiggle it until it stops sliding and it kind of holds together. You basically get the slip worked into the piece. So I'm pushing downward and wiggling at the same time. Okay. Now if I actually did want to start up again with another set of coils, like I said, I would want to cut it at an angle. Do this with a needle tool. Cut it at an angle. Cut the one that I am starting up with. This one is closer in size. So I angled down, so I'm going to angle up. And I'm going to place it in. I'm going to heel those together pretty good so that I can't see that split, and start it up again. And I would want to continue with the 3 again if I wanted to keep doing this pattern. Now the inside is pretty connected to start with because I smoothed out the back on it, but I still have that one crease as it's going up, so make sure you go back and connect that. And again, the back end of a spoon or a fork or anything is totally good to be able to do that, and make sure you smooth. Always hold on the outside anytime you're doing this when you're pushing against it, otherwise it'll push right through it. So. These usually don't get a real, they're a little hard to get so that they're nice and even everywhere. You're going to have to do some batting to get it in. So like right now, this little lump right here, if I didn't want that there, I would push out from the inside first to get the other part there. And that little lump, what I would do is actually put a hand on the inside and you're kind of slapping it basically. Not straight through it, but just slapping it and getting it to kind of put in. If there is any troubles with getting a part in, we can also use a block of wood to do the batting, but your hand will work the majority of time on things. So don't forget that you can kind of ease it out. Just don't push right in that one spot. Go from in front of it to behind it whenever you smooth through it. So, and then clean up the bottom. I still have kind of a mess down in the bottom there. Make sure you take care of that and anything that's oozing out the sides. Now on this one, like I said, I went back and I actually took a lot of time and worked that together. If I wanted to smooth the outside of it, I could, the same thing, go through with the hand on the inside and go through and scrape to smooth everything out, basically. Okay, so that is one way of coiling. And again, you can just do one and keep going straight up. If you do that and you don't connect first on the outside, I would stop every time about this height so that you can still hold on with your hand, and then do some scraping on the inside. You can even, and this surprised me when I saw this one the first time, you can even take and scratch with your fork first and make it like this before you actually go in, and then you can smooth it with a spoon or with the back end of a fork. And that surprised me, but it like works it together. It's like scoring from the inside instead of in between, and you're okay. So, okay. And take care of your tops on things, and there's lots of fun little things that you can do to that. The one that I want to show you too is the thicker one. So with this one, instead of making the coils nice and thin like those, I'm going to keep it really, really wide and big. So again, I'm just going to kind of make it semi-round here and then round it out. This one I'm not going to get much smaller than this. You're technically kind of working in this way halfway between a slab and a coil. It's just that the coil makes it so that the slab will be a same distance all the way across it, and then what you do is you just press it out, and I kind of push forward as I press down so that it does level it out throughout. always flip it and it will work a little bit easier again. It's just like if you've ever rolled out cookies, when you flip them, they start moving a little bit faster. On this one, it's important that this stays the same distance all the way through. And a lot of hand building is a little bit thicker. It doesn't have to be, but you don't want it to get too thin, otherwise you're going to have some troubles with things breaking apart. So you can work with coils and slabs that are about this thick, and basically on this one, I think it was about 4 coils, if I remember correctly, that I worked up to create this. And to do that then, again, you would have a base. I'm just going to rip this one off, use this base. So, and same idea, that put it in. This one too, when you put them together, overlap them a little bit, let it sit right next to it, take your needle tool at an angle and go straight down through it. So I'm going to pick that up so you can see it. So at an angle, I'm going to push straight down through it, and that's going to make my bevel so that I can put these together later on. So I'm going to take the extra off of that side, the extra off of that side, push them in, and then I'm going to heel that together. And as long as you have a good bevel and it's still pretty soft, I don't have to slip and score it. I can just work them together. I'm kind of twisting between my fingers as I do this inside of it so that it works the top layer across and the bottom layer behind. Again, if they're just sitting next to each other straight on, they're going to break apart super easily. So heel the top, get this all about the same length. There I have about a 3-inch one, so every one as I go up from this is about 3 inches at a time. To get the parts to come in, you just take kind of all the way around it and kind of push in. If I want something to come out, again, from the inside, just like on the wheel, I can belly it out. It's just that instead of going all the way around and around and around, you do this and kind of work your way around. And again, if it's on a paper towel or a piece of paper, swirls pretty easily, especially a piece of paper. So you can kind of work your way around as you're working on things. Don't forget your ribs that you have. I did a lot of the ribbing on it, both on the outside to kind of get it to lay together really well, and then on the inside so it get that same curve. This is a nice curve working with it. On the inside I would use this after I used my knuckle to kind of push it out all the way, then I would do this to get the nice curve all the way around it. And then I cut into it afterwards when it was leather hard. And on this specific one, the cutouts that I actually took out from here, I picked those up and I laid it on and slip and scored those on the top, so I got 3 levels going on things. So totally feel free to make use of those. These are kind of dangerous that they're sticking up off the top like this. These, until it's fired the next time, are very easy to break, so you want to be very cautious with things like this that you do. So keep these relatively substantial so they don't break on you in the process too. So this one you can see is about a little over a 1/4 inch thick all the way around it, closer to a 1/2 inch almost. Just keep in mind the blow up rate is usually anything about 3/4 of an inch is very easy to blow up. Make sure that you're controlling and things are only going back when they're actually dry to be fired. So, okay. Any questions about coils?